A warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the second edition of AFRAA SkyConnect Leadership Dialogues. Good morning or good afternoon to you all from AFRAA in a warm and sunny Nairobi. Every month, AFRAA Connect Leadership Dialogues series hosts a top executive from aviation, tourism, trade, and financial or economic sectors for a thought-provoking one-on-one dialogue on matters relevant to aviation development and other pertaining hot matters and issues. Expect nothing but out-of-the-box thinking and far-reaching recommendations to shape African aviation. My name is Maureen Kahonge, Senior Manager, Business Development and Communications at AFRAA. Joining us on stage today as our guest is Mr. Tefera Mekonnen Tefera, the Secretary General of the African Civil Aviation Commission, AFCAC. Mr. Tefera's extensive professional experience in civil aviation spans over 40 years, and he has been at the helm of AFCAC since January 2019. Prior to his role as Secretary General of AFCAC, Mr. Tefera was the Director of Air Transport at the organization, where he was responsible for matters pertaining to the Yamoussoukro decision and the single African air transport market, up till the time he was appointed as the Secretary General of AFCAC in December 2018. Today, Mr. Tefera will share with us AFCAC's perspectives and AFCAC's role in making Africa's air transport industry milestones on intra-Africa connectivity and SAATM implementation, on industry competitiveness and costs, on aviation policy developments, and also the role of regional institutions and organizations in supporting Africa's air transport development. The session will be moderated by Raphael Kuchi, AFRAA Director, Government, Legal and Industry Affairs. A few housekeeping announcements before I hand over to our moderator. Today's session is scheduled to run for 1 hour. For the first 45 minutes, the moderator will lead the discussion with his set of questions. And for the second part, we will take questions from the floor. Please post your questions on the Q&A tab. To have a better quality of the sound, all audio and video functionalities have been disabled except for the speakers on stage. We'll do our best to respond to your questions within the scheduled time, and questions that overflow the session will be addressed post-webinar. We also welcome your comments on the chat function. Please let us know your name and where you're joining us from. I now hand over to the moderator. Raphael, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Maureen. And good afternoon, good morning, everyone, depends on where you are. Once again, we appreciate your time and the opportunity to join us this afternoon on SkyConnect, your one and only authoritative source of real-time important dialogue between AFRAA and senior executives in the aviation industry on the African continent. I bet you will not regret for being part of this event today. So please watch us, actively participate by sending us any questions or comments you may have through the the Q&A tab, and we will take them as we go along. As Maureen indicated, our conversation today will last for 45 minutes, followed by us taking your questions and answers. Where necessary, some of these questions will be taken as we go along so that we do not lose track of very important issues. Ladies and gentlemen, our host, as has been introduced to us, is a gentleman who is one of the few people I know whose first name and surname are exactly the same, Mr. Tefera Mekonnen Tefera. Welcome, Mr. Tefera, to the show. Mr. Tefera, as Secretary General of AFCAC, has the broad task of ensuring that African aviation is well coordinated. For those who might not be very much familiar with AFCAC, AFCAC is the specialized agency of the African Union responsible for civil aviation. And among its key tasks, AFCAC's aim is to facilitate cooperation and coordination among African states towards the development of an integrated and sustainable air transport. AFCAC is also tasked with ensuring that the safety of the aviation on the continent by working with the civil aviation authorities and with states to ensure the coordinated implementation of ICAO SAPs. And finally, AFCAC's role is to ensure the harmonized development of air transport and in an environmentally sustainable manner. We would delve more into some of these aspects in our today's discussion. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a number of areas to cover. And as we go along, please let us know if you have any questions or comments, put them in the tab, and we shall take them accordingly. So on the broad shoulders of Mr. Tefera hangs the aviation industry in Africa. And he is a macho man by all standards in the aviation industry, capable of delivering. There have been and there are a number of initiatives that Mr. Tefera has introduced and continuing to pursue to ensure that African aviation takes its rightful place. So this might just be a very good starting point, Mr. Tefera. Where are we with what AFCAC's role and responsibilities are on the African continent? Where are we with those developments? Thank you.
Greetings to all. Thanks to AFRA for giving me this opportunity to share the views and perspectives of AFCAC through this forum. I'd like to extend my appreciation to the audience who are sparing their respective time to take part in this session. I'm pleased, Mr. Rafael Kuchi, to be moderated by you. You have given more highlights on the mandates and responsibilities of AFCAC as part of the 2009 constitutional mandates and that of the institutional regulatory framework given to AFCAC to be the executing agency of the Yamoussoukro decision. Of course, the single African market. You have highlighted the objectives of AFCAC. Therefore, it may not be prudent for me to repeat what you have said, because you have listed the major responsibilities and mandates of AFCAC. The audience, in my opinion, will be eager to know where we are. If you could allow me, Rafael, let me take a few minutes on what is going on in AFCAC to bring more effectiveness in the discharge of the responsibilities which you mentioned. AFCAC, with the support from President and members of the Bureau, conducted studies on the restructuring of AFCAC with the expectations and its activities as well. Ongoing studies to develop a 10-year strategic plan and management information system. These two studies are the first of its type in AFCAC. When it comes to the 10-year strategic plan, as we all know, there are global plans developed by ICAO, the Global Air Navigation Plan, Global Aviation Security Plan, the Global Aviation Safety Plan, to mention very few. At the same time, AFCAC being the special agency of the African Union, it has to take into consideration the critical of Agenda 2063. Therefore, there is a need to have a 10-year strategic plan in this respect. I'll not talk much about the need to have a management information system because we are becoming more dependent on the ICT. AFCAC has been designated by the African Union Commission to serve as the lead agency to the Joint Prioritized Action Plan. This Joint Prioritization Action Plan is established to coordinate all activities on the continent on sustainable development of the single African air transport market. In this respect, AFCAC has been coordinating the various meetings of the GAPAP, and I want to share my satisfactions on the reduction of duplications of efforts, and we're trying to optimize the available resources as well. AFCAC is more than before reaching out to partners and working on the review of existing memorandum of understanding and cooperations as well. With regard to the executing agency of the YD and operationalization of the single African air transport market, it's worth mentioning that the African Development Bank institutional support to AFCAC has been materialized. AFCAC has increased the staff of the executing agency with 3 professional and enforcement officers. The executing agency has already started a review of its work plan for its consideration by the monitoring body of the YD to be presented in a few weeks' time. AFRAA and regional economic communities are members of the monitoring body, as we all know. We have revised the concrete measures on the solemn commitment of the SAATM to make it more objective. And at this time, we are also developing key performance indicators for all provisions of the YD and its regulatory instruments, not only by states, but by the airlines as well. This will allow us to have a proper reporting and monitoring mechanism. I'm pleased to inform you that there are various actions being undertaken in coordination with the African Union Commission, European Union, the African Development Bank to develop tools and advocacy materials for the monitoring of the SAATM to allow all African states sign up to the SAATM and fully implement it. I will postpone the expected queries on what AFCAC has been doing with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic and also on the sustenance of the industry. Now, what is the status of the aviation industry in Africa? How we are looking into one of the mandates of AFCAC to foster the implementation of the ICAO SARPs. In 2011, as we know, the effective implementation of safety was close to 48%.
Mr. Tefera, if we may just exhaust the mandate of the progress or status report of the AFCAC Secretariat on the issues it's doing before we move to the state of the industry. You mentioned a number of very important undertakings that AFCAC is pursuing. Among them, the development of a 10-year strategic plan. When are we likely to have this completed, and what is the level of engagement of stakeholders in giving input to this plan?
Thank you, Rafael. This 10 years strategic plan will be conducted by the Technical Cooperation Bureau of ICAO. The terms of reference and the expectations, timelines are clearly set out, that all the outcomes starting from the inception report will be circulated to all stakeholders, not only to member states, but also to AFRAA and other partners, to clearly identify their expectations from AFCAC on its responsibilities and what the strategic plan should achieve. In accordance to the timelines, we are expecting that the first draft will be tabled for the standing committees of AFCAC. That is experts, director generals, and partners who would be serving in the technical committee, which will address safety and technical issues, air transport committee, areas related to aviation security, facilitation, air transport, and environment. So we are expecting the first draft to be circulated prior to June to have sufficient feedback for the meeting of the standing committee of AFCAC. Then it will proceed through the various mechanisms and organs of AFCAC. I'm optimistic that the upcoming plenary of AFCAC by the end of this year will endorse this 10 years strategic plan.
Okay, so for individuals within the aviation space, for you to have your input there, you need to liaise with your sector organization or association, who would actually be mandated to collect views from their membership for purpose of the plan and submit back to AFCAC as part of the revision of the first phase. Just trying to get clarity.
As I mentioned earlier on, it will be circulated to all.
Yes.
Member states, members of the ministerial working group, and also members of the working monitoring body of the YD, and the various organs of the African Union Commission as well, so that the strategic document will take into account inputs from all stakeholders and partners.
Okay, great, thank you. You also mentioned about the revision of the concrete measures. What necessitated their revision? Why do we have to review them after such a short period that they were developed?
Thank you. It is a very important question to ask. As you may recall, most of this, the steps or the measures identified in 2016 and coming to force as of 2017 were subjective in its nature. The states who signed to solemn commitment as part of the concrete measures, they were only supposed to write letters, notify others. It didn't go to the details. It doesn't show to what extent that a state which signs the solemn commitment is implementing all the provisions of the YD without any condition. Most of the measures which requires states to report to were subjective. And as AFRAA knows, some of our states who signed to solemn commitment were going through bilateral arrangements, putting some restrictions on some of the traffic rights. Therefore, not only there was a need to revise the concrete measures, but thanks to the UNECA, there is a need to develop key performance indicators for states and airlines to report on each of the provisions of the YD and also on the provisions of the regulatory instruments. Therefore, we will have a transparent reporting and monitoring mechanism. Okay. Not only for these amendments are initiated only for reporting and monitoring, but it will allow us to identify causes, root causes, which we need to address as well. In a nutshell, these are the situations which prompted us to make a review of the concrete measures and also to develop key performance indicators.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much for that clarification. And this is very important to the industry. It will be good for us as we move along to know how effectively we are progressing with regards to implementation of SAATM and all the other programs that you are working on. Thank you for introducing KPIs under the monitorship of AFCAC. We hope to get more out of that. Now, if we can move to the aviation industry, what is how do you view the aviation industry today after all the beating that it has taken since last year when COVID became a reality?
Thank you. When we review the status of the aviation industry, I would like to address it from the requirements on safety, security, environment, and other aspects. To what extent the industry has been making a lot of progress prior to COVID. As we all know, the effective implementation on safety in 2011 was close to 48,000. 48% where 12 to 13 states were under significant safety concern list. In 2020, much has been done, and as a result, it has reached to 59%. As compared to what we were in 2011, we have only one African state with significant safety concern.
Commendable. This is good.
When, as you are aware, AFCAC in collaboration with ICAO have cooperative inspectorate scheme for safety inspectors. Since its establishment, we only have 24, but as of the induction and refreshment program conducted 2 weeks ago, at this time we have got more than 72 ICAO validated safety African inspectors who could assist their respective states and also work with AFCAC on the provision of technical assistance. On aviation security, in 2007, our effective implementation
on safety, out of interest, why has the uptake or states given so much importance to safety in recent times than in the past? Is it because AFCAC and ICAO are doing something special, something unique? Is it because the states themselves have realized that they need to up their game? Or is there some stick and carrot approach to get the states to move this fast in the last couple of years?
Thank you. Much of the credit should go to the states, because it is the state which is on ground. It is, as we all know, most of our African states, they don't have the resources. With the available resources, they have managed to remove safety concerns and also to implement the correction action plan. We have to also give due consideration to the AFI safety plan of ICAO, who have been providing technical assistance to African member states. AFCAC on its part, as I mentioned early on, utilized its budget to assist most of the states who were under significant safety concerns. There were also partners who provided financial support to the African Safety Fund. Therefore, all have participated in this respect, but I will give much credit to our member states in this respect.
Good. So how can we ensure the sustainability of this? That is not just we get there and then we drop, but that even as we strive to improve our safety levels, we will keep them high and continue to build on them. What is AFCAC doing to ensure that?
Well, history is showing us that states, once they are taking part in the USOAP, there is a ICAO mechanism on the continuous monitoring approach. There is also a validation exercise when implementing the corrective action plans. Therefore, what I am expecting is more effective implementation of those identified actions to be implemented by respective states. Therefore, I remain optimistic that sooner we'll reach to the global average when it comes to effective implementation.
Yeah, in view of time, if I may, if I can just move a bit swiftly so that we can make time to touch on as many points as possible. I just wanted to tap your minds on the high-level task force that was organized by the AU and AFCAC, bringing together stakeholders to seek support for the industry, which is being battered by COVID-19. Where are we with COVID, with the high-level task force recommendation, the implementation?
Thank you. Right when the declaration of COVID-19 has been a global pandemic, AFCAC, in coordination with the African Union Commission, quickly mobilized various stakeholders, including AFRAA, to develop an immediate relief measures for African aviation sector. And as you may recall, the Office of the Chairperson of the AUC called upon states to consider the aviation sector as part of the national relief measures. This was done in April and May of last year. Various virtual meetings were hosted by AFCAC to allow sharing of experiences and sensitization of financial partners to consider the aviation sector in their relief funding. AFCAC, in collaboration with the World Bank, has held high-level conference, which was followed by the African Development Bank, which called upon all financial partners and ministers to take the aviation sector among the priorities in this respect. Concurrently, under the guidance of the African Union Commission, AFCAC coordinated the establishment of the high-level task force, which you mentioned. This task force was a multi-sector aviation industry entities, which include AFRAA, ASIA Africa, IATA Africa, the regional economic communities, our representatives at ICAO, who developed recommendations for the restart and resilience of the aviation industry. One has to note that recommendations made by the high-level task force embraces the ICAO CART and its guidance principles and proposed measures on COVID-19. Ministerial Subcommittee of Transport adopted the action plan and the resolutions of the high-level task force along with the recommendations. AFCAC, together with other aviation multi-sectoral stakeholders, have developed a call for action for African Ministers of Health, Air Transport, and Tourism on the safe resumption of aviation and protecting lives. AFCAC is constantly exploring ways to support the recommendations of the high-level task force. One such approach is convening workshops to address the need to reinforce economic oversight of air transport. This is among the recommendations of the high-level task force.
Yeah, Mr. Tefera, among the many recommendations, some of which you have just highlighted, there was also a financial recommendation. You know, many airlines have so far in Africa have succumbed to COVID. About 6 or 7 airlines have either gone into liquidation or are in the process, are in their ICU, with soon to go into liquidation because of COVID. Unlike human beings who need oxygen during this period, what many of the airlines actually need now is something called vitamin M, which is money. Where are we with trying to help these airlines with money to ensure their sustainability?
I know that you'll bring this question. As we are aware, African governments are providing support to the regulatory institutions, that is civil aviation authorities and service providers, to enable the smooth restart of operations. The African Union CDC.
Yeah, Mr. Tefera, if I may just add to that, you know, this morning I was just reading an article which was shared by my good friend, the ICAO Regional Director for East Africa. The US government has just released another 15 billion to its airlines. This is in addition to the 25 billion they first provided to their airlines, and subsequent to that, another 15 billion, and now another 15 billion. So in total, some 5 billion going to the US airlines to date. Now, we compete in the same market African airlines today, apart from what they're getting from their individual states by way of tax concessions, the industry is sort of worried that whilst we are competing with others, we currently are not getting support while others are getting support. Is it likely that post-COVID, Africa will have airlines?
Well, I think on the sustenance of African airlines post-COVID, much should have been said by your organization as you are closer to the industry. However, what I could say is that, yes, AFCAC is aware that our service providers and the regulatory institutions are being assisted by their respective states. When it comes to the continental initiative and recommendations of the high-level task force, the African Union has called upon all development partners on the mobilization of financial support amounting to $20 billion to support the African aviation industry. This has been communicated. As we know, most of these financial institutions are working with governments on bilateral basis. As a result, it will be very difficult at this moment to mention the amount which will be pledged to the respective airlines. But what I have understood is that the African Development, the African Exim Bank are working with some states to assist the airlines on the relief measures. This is what I could only say in this respect. Yes,
can
African airlines
meeting put in a word that the African airlines are in the ICU and deadly in need of vitamin M. Otherwise, by next year, we will not have airlines to be talking about this.
Yes, Rafael, I do share your concerns. Our African airlines, even before COVID-19, they are in a critical situations when it comes to doing business. As a result of COVID-19, which prompted most of them to ground their aircraft or reduce their operations by more than 50 or 60%. One can imagine the situations of African airlines. There is a need to join hands to support these airlines in this respect. On the other hand, the airlines need to revisit their business plan, taking into account the challenge, to what extent they can optimize resources or join hands with fellow African airlines in the form of various cooperation and collaborative mechanisms so that they will be able to reduce costs and optimize available resources.
I'm sure the SG of AFRAA is listening and is busy taking notes at this point in time and will nudge his airlines to actually do some of these things that you're talking about. But let me just assume that we're going to get the financial resource and that things are going to work out well. African airlines are going to go beyond COVID. Now, connectivity has remained a big challenge on the continent, Mr. Tefera. I'm not too sure, why is Africa so poorly connected? What's the problem?
Could you rephrase your question, please?
I'm just saying that Africa seems very poorly connected. And I was just wondering whether AFCAC has the answers to why connectivity is so bad compared to other regions.
Well, there are a lot of contributing factors to this connectivity. One is the delay in the implementation of all the provisions of the YD. There are states still who are negotiating frequency and traffic rights. Since most of the routes are thin, to substantiate point-to-point connections, there is a need for African states to allow eligible African airlines to exercise all the provisions of the YD. This could have contributed in enhancing connectivity. The other aspect of it is cost of operations. Cost of operations comes from various angles. Some governments are taxing the aviation sector, and political authorities and service providers are not in full compliance with ICAO policies on charges and fees. I listened to one of the workshops last week when discussions were going on among experts on economic oversight. And it happened to me that it's really, really worrisome when we see the percentage of taxes and fees. Therefore, doing business is expensive in Africa, therefore, it's not conducive for African airlines. On the other part, when taxes are imposed on tickets, when excessive charges are imposed on the airline operators, it will be transferred directly to the users. The price tickets are expensive as compared to other regions. Therefore, all these are contributing factors.
Very big item, so is the willingness of states to allow airlines to operate in their countries. And it just baffles my mind. Even now that we are fast-tracking implementation of the YD through, it would appear that we're still not getting as much enthusiasm from the states as we should expect. Happening. Mr. Tefera, are you still on?
Yes, I was just having water. Otherwise, I am available.
Okay. So I'm just saying, with SAATM, I think up to now, only about 34 states have signed the solemn commitment, and about 18 the memorandum of implementation. I'm not too sure, subject to correction. But why is it that we still have so many states not willing to commit to opening up their markets, especially knowing the importance of air transport to their own economic development?
I see it from another angle. At this time, we have got 34 of the 49 states party to the SAATM. These 34 states are almost more than 80% of the RPK on the continent. Why are some states remain reluctant to join SAATM, or those states which are party to SAATM are not fully implementing it? There are various contributing factors for the delay. However, we need to be encouraged that implementation of the YD is showing progress as compared to early 2000, or as compared to where we were when SAATM was launched in 2015.
What one thing, in your view, do you think we can do, or AFCAC can do, or AU can do, or any for that matter can do to ensure that we fast track the implementation, even if it's of the 18, to fully implement SAATM?
As I mentioned early on, there is a need to properly assess implementation status of these 34 states through the revised concrete measures, and also to, once the KPI is approved, to use the information received and work with our government and African Union and the industry to challenge those states that, though the government has signed the solemn commitment for unconditional implementation of all the provisions, these are the results. We need to show them that they are not implementing.
Yeah.
We remain diplomatic. We are only showing the figures, but we need to challenge those states. That's one. From the industry perspective, some of African airlines are working against the SAATM. They prefer to have bilateral negotiation than endorsement of the full implementation of the YD. That is the reality. This will be the area where AFCAC and the AUC would be working with AFRAA to reach out to those states who have some challenge or receiving feedback from the airlines that they would prefer to have bilateral negotiation.
Yeah.
So we need to handle it in this way. Once we have the amended concrete measures and also the KPI, since the executing agency have got 4 officers who will be dedicated on the SAATM, I think we'll be in a better situation to advise our government and the African Union on the status of implementation, because the single African air transport market is not an African project and is not an AFCAC project. It means a lot to Agenda 2063. It means a lot to African Continental Free Trade Area and other projects on the continent. Therefore, we have to take it seriously. Though AFCAC doesn't have the carrot and the stick, but there are a lot of mechanisms on how to report on states, on the status of states implementation, particularly on those who signed the solemn commitment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tefera. At this point, allow me to get to what some of our guests are asking, so that we can include them in this conversation. Sege Gatoi is asking that EU negotiates as a bloc, whilst Africa negotiates as countries, individual countries versus the EU. Is there something in the EU Air Services Agreement that Africa can borrow or AFCAC can borrow for use by African states or for any entity that might want to negotiate on behalf of African states? Your take on that?
Well, it is a good question. I would like to extend my appreciation.
Yeah, the question is, EU negotiates as a bloc against weak, sometimes poor, feeble African states. Can we borrow a link from the EU and find ways of negotiating as a bloc?
Thank you. I'd like to extend appreciation to the person who raised this question. Indeed, there is a need for African states to join hands on the negotiation with the European Union and also on with other third-party states. As some of the audience know, starting from 2005, there was an effort to have a binding clause in order to counter the horizontal clause of the European Union on the designation and the exercise of traffic rights. In 2007, when the Conference of Ministers met in, I think it was in Algiers, where I took part as well, we couldn't reach to a binding negotiation framework. As a result, the African Union Summit couldn't endorse because consensus at experts level, then at ministers level couldn't be established at that time.
So are we likely to see consensus anytime soon?
Now, what we have been working was in 2018, the first draft was developed by the African Union Commission to have a binding clause. Few experts took part in the discussion. And while in 2 to 3 weeks time, feedbacks would be received from member states on the revised negotiation scheme or framework, which we are expecting it to be binding, because most of our member states have felt that there is a need to join hands and counter the block negotiation.
Okay.
The draft has been finalized.
I think a short answer to Sege is that yes, indeed, AFCAC is working on an air service agreement for Africa that is likely to dovetail into what the EU is doing, or we have similar arrangements. We'll have something that gives us enough clout to be able to negotiate with that. We are running out of time. We just have about 6 minutes. There are a number of questions, Mr. Tefera, so I want to go through them quite quickly, and then you take them as we go along briefly. The second question is from Akite Gladys, which says, what are the mechanisms put in place by AFCAC to engage states' commitment for increasing their EI score within USOP? I'm not sure whether you know what EI means, EI score means in this case.
As we all know, we have in Africa the Abuja safety target. And AFCAC has a responsibility to monitor the status of implementation of all the provisions of the Abuja safety target, which takes into account recently also provisions on safety and air navigation services. We are working closely with the steering committee of the AFI plan and the secretariat of ICAO in this respect. We are coordinating with the regional offices of ICAO, the activities, the yearly activities, in order to reach out to states on technical assistance to increase the AI of safety and security. In this respect, I would like to mention two developments that we have secured funds from the African Development Bank to assist member states of the SAATM. We have signed project implementation agreement with ICAO. What is limiting us is restrictions on travel. Otherwise, funds are available, states are identified, priorities are set for technical assistance using the funds from the African Development Bank. On the other hand, we are also working with the European Union to sponsor the African safety inspectors to assist states which are in need of assistance to enhance their AI.
Okay, great, thank you. Now, another question, this one from Heidi says, can you tell us how many African airlines have received financial assistance so far since COVID, or do you know or you don't?
We don't have any information in AFCAC.
And okay, and a follow-up question is that what is blocking the release of funds to African airlines?
Sorry, which funds?
What is blocking the release? The high-level task force made said through the AU and other financial institutions, they've been able to mobilize some 25 billion. But what is blocking the release of these funds to the airline industry? That's a follow-up question from Heidi.
The information AFCAC has so far is that the African Union Commission has not only circulated this request to development and financial partners, but they're making follow-up with these institutions to consider financial support to African industry. The information what we have at this moment is that these financial institutions are working bilaterally with respective states. Therefore, airlines need to approach their governments to look into the government to consider the urgency for the airlines to receive financial support. Otherwise, I'm not sure whether there are some blockages or not. But what I know is that some of the financial institutions have a condition that any airline to be provided assistance, among the criteria is to be member of the SAATM.
Okay.
Thank you
so much. Dr. Eddie Patrick is asking us a similar question on what measures will be taken to directly support African airlines. As you can see, there has been some recommendation by the high-level task force, and there are plans, follow-up plans to ensure that that money is accessed and released so that airlines can benefit from that. And then you have a follow-up question on how much in terms of emergency fund has been mobilized to support airlines. As I said, it's $25 billion US. It's actually not mobilized in full, if I understand it, but there has been a commitment to avail some 25 billion, but I'm not too sure whether the fund is actually available, Mr. Eddie. And then we have Wycliffe, who says, fuel price remains to be the biggest concern faced by airline industry in the modern world. As Africa, do we have any plans in place to solve this issue in the near future? Mr. Tefera, how do we bring down fuel prices?
It will be very difficult at this moment to talk about the amount pledged by individual financial institutions. As I said early on, that these financial institutions are handling it bilaterally with individual states. The African Development Bank have organized a conference which takes into consideration of the various interests of other financial institutions. In this respect, the World Bank Group and the African Exim Bank took part on that respect. We are waiting for the outcome of that conference and also the discussion among the financial institutions. This is what I could say at this moment. You are.
Sorry. Another question from Hasim Pondo says that now on the 10-year plan, to what extent travel and related services under COVID cloud will be built into it? On the 10-year strategic plan, are there any plans to build into it travel-related services in this COVID era?
Well, as any strategic plan, there is a need to make SWOT analysis. There is a need also to consider the impact of COVID. As we know, it will take us longer to have the required amount of Africans to be vaccinated. Therefore, the impact of this COVID-19 will be prolonged for some years. Therefore, the strategic document needs to take into account of these situations. In doing so, all the stakeholders of the aviation, of civil aviation, that is the air navigation service providers, airport service providers, airlines, and even the regulators are affected, be it financially or otherwise. Therefore, this strategic document needs to address all this into account. And it is my expectation that those who are working on it will address it. But since every one of us would have the opportunity to review, then we'll make sure that all the concerns are incorporated, not only this, but other weaknesses and also threats.
Yes, Mr. Tefera, at this point, we have run out of time, but I still have a number of very important questions. If you can spare us 10 or 15 more minutes, then we can take some of these critical questions for your response. I think people are eager to hear from you as Secretary General of AFCAC, and your responses seems to be going down very well, and so people kept asking many more questions. Do you have 10, 15 more minutes to spare?
Well, I'm here to serve.
Excellent.
So I don't have any time constraint.
Thank you. So, thank you so much, Mr. Tefera. Yes. So ladies and gentlemen, if your time permits, still hang on. We take on a couple of more questions. Please do not ask more questions, as we might not be able to take all of it, because we also want to respect everybody's time. So we're just going to move up until we hit 12:20, and then we bring down the curtains. So now moving forward quickly, and if we can be quite brief on the answers, it will help us. Hassim Pondo is asking again on the AU high-level task force. Recommendation number 1 requires states or countries to set up locally multi-stakeholder national action plan. Do you know how many countries have done this so far?
Rafael, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm saying that the question is that the high-level task force recommendations, one of them says that local or country level multi-stakeholder national action plans should be put together. How many countries have done this so far, if you know?
Well, I don't have the exact number, but AFCAC got the opportunity to attend meetings of our member states. As we know, it is a requirement in accordance to Annex 9 and the various manuals that there is a need to have a national program for such pandemic. Of course, most of the meetings which AFCAC attended have revealed that there was a proper engagement of stakeholders when such programs were reviewed and measures were introduced.
Okay. Now tell me, one other question from Yashna. Yashna is saying, will AFCAC be having a different treatment when dealing with states that are party to SAATM and those that are not?
Unfortunately, the answer is yes. Financial partners are very much interested. Financial partners are very much interested to support member states of the SAATM. As I mentioned early on, the African Development Bank have pledged fund to assist states, not only states, but African airlines, eligible airlines of member states of the SAATM, to get assistance to be certified by IATA through the IOSA and ISAMISM as well. We have funds for safety, security, and environment areas to assist those states. Unfortunately, the answer is yes when it comes to certain member states and African airlines. It's not only the African Development Bank, but other financial institutions which are amending or reviewing their cooperation areas are giving priority to SAATM, because SAATM is the AU, part of the AU Agenda 2063, and the air transport plays critical role in ensuring the Agenda 2063 is achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tefera. This is now from me to you. Can you just tell us, what is your working relationship like with AFRAA? Do you work together on some projects or all projects? How do you relate?
AFRA is, it's very difficult. We have different roles. AFRA represents African Airlines, whereas we are responsible for all civil aviation matters. Other than that, I can say that we can be considered as twin brothers or twin organizations when it comes to promoting all the agendas of African Union, the agendas of AFCAC, and the agendas of AFRA. AFCAC has equal responsibility with AFRA when it comes to facilitating the operation of the YD, facilitating African eligible airlines to benefit from the SAATM.
Yeah.
We do have dual responsibilities. Therefore, we are working together. AFRA is part of the monitoring body of the YD, which oversees the functions and activities of the executing agency of the YD.
Yeah, so let me just interject here. So on the issue of the high-level task force working towards getting some financial relief for the industry, are you working with AFRA on that?
Indeed, yes. We have been making follow-up with the AUC jointly.
Okay, thank you very much. Now another question, this time from Marius. It says, why can't we have open skies for all our airlines to get them off the ground and get a restart going? Marius, I'm not too sure what you mean by open skies for all airlines. The essence of SAATM is to open up the skies for all African airlines. And that is it. But to do that, you need to fulfill certain necessary monetary requirements so that there is alignment and there is consistency by the operators in how they do business. So that is what we're talking about here. But yes, indeed, the single African air transport market is intended to open up the market for all African airlines. Now, Heidi says, as a comment on the whole process referencing implementation of YD. It is very, very laborious and complicated. Why can we not see consensus? Mr. Tefera? Said the way we are going about YD and SAATM is complicated and very much labor intensive. We talked about a lot of workshops, and we don't know how many tables and chairs will be produced out of those workshops and how that will eventually impact on implementation. So someone is saying this is complicated. Can we have a simple process that will garner consensus?
Thank you. There is nothing different from SAATM and YD. Yes, are saying that why do we need SAATM? Why don't we focus on the YD? I think I have to be diplomatic, in responding to this.
Thank you. Now,
SAATM is nothing but an commitment members for expeditious and unconditional implementation of all the provisions of the YD.
Yeah.
So the YD is the regulatory instruments. SAATM is the market to those who committed to play within the framework of the YD.
Yes.
Therefore, there is no difference.
Okay, so that's quite clear. That's quite clear. Now, another question, a very interesting question and a very nice perspective to look at it. It says, at this point in time that the airlines are suffocating, wouldn't we rather focus on saving the air transport industry rather than focus on developing a 10-year strategic plan? How about if by the time we finish developing the strategic plan, there's no aviation environment to apply it? Is it a misplaced priorities, or can we reshape that?
Well, I think I should have gone through all the responsibilities and mandates of AFCAC. AFCAC is not AFRA, or AFCAC is not Association of Airlines in various respects. We are more responsible on sustainable development of air transport on the continent. In order for Africa to benefit from air transport, and also for air transport to play a significant role on the socio-economic development of respective African states and also on the continent, there is a need to be guided by a long-term strategic plan. In order for our member states to be better assisted, AFCAC need to have a long-term strategic plan, which can be tabled for development partners. In the past, we used to have a 3-year plan, which doesn't show where we want the industry in 10 years' time, where we want the regulatory framework and other aspects of the AFCAC. Therefore, it is a priority for the continent to have a long-term strategic plan. Of course, we are very much concerned on the situations of African airlines. As I mentioned earlier on, African airlines need to work with their respective member states because financial institutions are working with states. The second one is the airlines themselves, they need to revisit their business plan, taking into account the situation, how they can survive, how they could reduce their costs, and also optimize the resources.
Yeah,
there have been various initiatives.
I take the last question.
There have been various initiatives.
And then we can wrap up because we're nearly out of our extra time. So now, and this is from Dr. Eddie Patrick, and he talked about the recent capacity building on economic oversight and regulations for sustainable development of air transport that will be organized for member states. And he's saying that we all know that, look, the outcome of the high-level task force recommendations were not implemented because of the crisis and the prioritization of other more pressing issues at the country level. Now, has AFCAC got a quick fix to how we can restart the aviation industry? How can we do that speedily? Is there a plan by AFCAC so that we can ensure that either airlines have the money or are able to retain their employees or recruit new people so that business can go on? Do you have any thoughts on that? And I think this should be our last question. And then I take your final thoughts, Mr. Tefera, briefly.
Rafael, I think I have responded to this question. So it is only, the question is framed differently. Otherwise, I think my recent response would have already addressed this question.
Thank you so much. So, Mr. Tefera, even as we wrap up, thank you very much for your time. But I cannot let you go without having your 2 or 3 takeaways that you want to give to us as we listen to you. What are your parting shots for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael, and through you to AFRAA for giving me this opportunity to share our views and also our perspective, what AFCAC has been aspiring to do in order to assist the African industry. We are currently in the midst of a worldwide trial that has changed our lives, and the pandemic has taught us that our choices matter. And post-COVID-19 era requires more activities for the sustenance of the aviation sector on the continent. Prior to that, we need to take into account the immediate relief measures which our industry on the continent requires. All recommendations made on various meetings and conferences during COVID-19, and those under discussion with development partners on financial relief measures needs to be worked again and again while keeping the momentum uninterrupted without any discouragement. We need to knock the doors of our development partners. Since the pledge made by the African Union Commission is not a one-time package. As I mentioned early on, there is a need, much need required for the sustenance of the aviation sector on the continent. There is also need to further explore additional sources of revenue for the implementation of the joint prioritized action plan in order to achieve more higher AI on IQ SARPs. This is part of a requirement to have sustainable development of air transport, which I mentioned. I would like to extend my appreciation to the African Development Bank, European Union, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa for their technical support on the various respects. My special thanks go to the Directorate of Infrastructure and Energy, particularly to the Commissioner, Her Excellency, Dr. Abu Zaid, for the policy guidance provided to AFCAC and designating me to effectively coordinate with partners and development in financial administration. My call to all development partners, financial institutions, governments that supports the African aviation industry should do more and give attention, particularly to African airlines, as a number of them are in dire need.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there, Mr. Tefera. On behalf of the Secretary General and the entire AFRAA team, I would want to thank you most sincerely for taking over an hour and 20 minutes of your busy schedule to join us on this SkyConnect Dialogue. Thank you very much for your input, and thank you for sharing with us the laudable task that AFCAC is undertaking to see African air transport get on its roadmap. We continue to pray that you will get more resources and guide the industry on the right path to strict recovery. To our participants, I want to thank you all for making time to join us today. Till we meet on the 5th of May, 2021, 5th of May 2021, which will be our next SkyConnect Dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all the best. Keep thinking about African air transport. Keep working together so that we can build a more resilient air transport industry during and especially after post-COVID, because the opportunities are here and are here for all of us to share, and we must grab it with both hands. Thank you very much, and you have a nice time. All the best to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.